Good morning and welcome to part 2 of When Frank Met, and today, having already had the conversation between Frank or Vince and Carl Gnass when he was visiting from the States to do the drawing classes in Dundee and Glasgow, I kind of can't believe we're actually here with John Byrne in his studio at home in Edinburgh. So part 2 is when Frank met John, when John met Frank. So good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Fraser.
Morning.
Earlier, when we were all getting set up, you were talking about how you came to adopt the name Frank quietly, and you both started off under an alias.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Is there part and parcel of doing this kind of work, getting into a kind of other character in order to be able to create the worlds or the images?
Well, I remember going round when I was in my teens, my late teens, going round every gallery in Cork Street, and there were 27 galleries in London. And I was staying with a school pal, Peter O'Neill, in Harlesden, and I saw a bit of his, the skirting board of his lavatory just behind the bowl, so you would have noticed, and painted a little picture. And then I took it round all the galleries, and they didn't even know what they were looking at. Never get any joy out of that. But then I went back to work at Stoddard's, where I started off as a slab boy. And one day I was in the design room, and I thought, there was an Observer, colour magazines were just coming out at the time. And I saw all these galleries that showed naive painters, and Sunday painters and innocents, naives, and hit on the idea of doing a little picture of a guy in a Panama hat holding a bunch of flowers. And I got Ali McRae, who I was talking about earlier on, to write out the name Patrick. And I put a couple of loops on it, and we looked round the quay underneath, and sent it off to the Portal Gallery in Grafton Street, and said it was a work of my father, who was a very keen amateur painter. Could you give me an opinion on this? And they said, I got a letter back saying, oh, this is quite interesting, could you send us some more? So I painted another 4 or 5, and I said, is he worth a show? And they went, yes. And I phoned them up, and they said, whoever answered the phone said, is it about the car? Because they dealt in vintage cars and stuff like that as well. And they were just round from Asprey's in Grafton Street. And my then wife made me confess. I was still doing it today. She hadn't done that. She was too honest. And then, so it went on.
But did you start off as Vince and turn into Frank, or have you always been Frank by night? And
no, when I left art school, I was just freelancing, and I was doing commissioned portraits, and I was doing murals for restaurants and posters for nightclubs. And when I was signing things, I was just signing Vincent Deegan. And then when I started working for Electric Soup, which was an underground adult humour rag in Glasgow, I went down there thinking it was a job. Like there was a printer, because it was run from a print shop, and I thought they were just looking for an artist to work in the print shop, and they said no, we're putting our own Viz style comic together, but you know, just go away and write and draw a strip and bring it back to us. And so I remembered from years earlier, sometimes in school people would bring in they would get a page of either Ur Willie or the Bruins, and they would Tipex out the words and put in words of their own. You can imagine the kind of thing. I won't give you examples, but so I thought I could do something like that. I could just draw a Bruins strip, and I drew a Bruins strip and took it in, and they were like, that's great, but you need to change it. You know, change the hairstyles, change the name, and but I signed it Frank Whiteley, partly because I quite liked the idea of
the alter ego
hiding behind another name, and partly because I thought my family wouldn't have liked the content. Not so much of what I was doing, but particularly the content of some of the stronger strips that were in the comic. So,
Do you remember the first time that you came across any of John's paintings or plays or designs? What was your first awareness of?
I don't know which came first. It would either have been your Beatles piece that was signed Patrick, or maybe it would have been when I started Glasgow School of Art when I was 17. That was back in '85, and the first flat that I was in, there was a Slab Boys poster. In the toilet.
It always starts in the toilet.
Yeah. So I guess that was probably my. I think that was my first introduction.
Have you ever seen the Slab Boys in the theatre?
No, I've seen Cutting a Rug in the Citizens recently. Yeah, I missed the Slab Boys.
Oh God, what year was it? 1978, and I was writing the play in secret again, so on a typewriter. I'd bought my first typewriter in the back Snedden in Paisley from a junk shop. It wasn't a junk shop, it was an antique store, but it was a junk shop. And there was a typewriter in the window for £15, and I bought it. And I eventually gave it to my cousin Aileen, who was learning to type, do shorthand and typing. And then I got another typewriter. There's a couple of them up there.
Yeah, it seems from here.
And I bought an Olympia in Sausalito for $11. And a German guy, he said, it was a German typewriter shop in San Francisco, and he offered me $150 for it, and I went, oh, not in your life. And anyway, I typed up, because I'm a one-finger typist, and I can type as fast as I can think, which is very slow. So, and it looked real. And I used to get the Plays and Players, which was a monthly magazine. There was a guy in a basement in Pimlico who had a publishing company, and he put out 7. It was called 7 Arts because he put out 7 magazines every month. Art and Artists, Books and Bookmen, Opera and Opera Goers, or whatever they're all called. He put out one called Plays and Players about the theatre. And my first play was Writer's Cramp, which I wrote in secret. And then he printed the entire, you got a half a play 1 month, and then the next half the next month. And the reason I got my first agent was Peggy Ramsey, Margaret Ramsey, and it was a David Hare when they just started up the Third Eye Centre, Circuit Hall Street, and Tom McGrath was the editor and director of the Third Eye Centre, and I got the idea. He said, "Will you do something? Would you have the first show with us of paintings? And who would you like to come to the opening of the Third Eye Centre?" So I said, there was a band in Glasgow called Cado Bell.
Yeah.
Airport
shut down and the stone's throw from nowhere.
Yeah.
I was selling some vinyl stuff to the guy that runs Groucho's in Dundee, and he couldn't believe that I had a Cado Bell single. He's like, nobody knows it. I was like,
I know.
I remember these guys, yeah.
So you know of Cado Bell.
And the guy, the sax player, did some of the music in the early Bill Forsyth films, didn't he? He went on to do. Sorry, I'm getting off track here, but anyway, Cado Bell, Third Eye Centre.
But the thing and I'd been getting Plays and Players, and in the first half of David Hare's Teeth and Smiles, with Helen Mirren playing the singer and a band behind her, So I thought, God, I could do that. And so I phoned her up and said, hello, Miss Ramsey, I've got an idea for putting on a version of David Hare's Teeth and Smiles at the Third Eye Centre in Glasgow. She said, "Go to the West End, darling." put the phone down. And so the next play, Writer's Cramp, I sent to her, because then I knew her, thought I knew her. She was harrowed. She was the best. She had everybody, Joe Orton, everybody, Robert Bolt, every playwright in London. And she wrote back to me in her spidery handwriting on a postcard. I'm sending this Writer's Cramp, who she loved. That was always her favourite. I'm sending to the Tricycle, the theatre upstairs, and whatever small, sort of small theatres in London. And she said, I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks and I expect you to have written a play when I come back. So 2 weeks later I went, hello, Miss Ramsey, it's John Byrne here, and I've written a play, another play, which has a beginning, a middle and an end. And she said, how fucking bourgeois, darling, send it to me. Then put the phone down. It's a great one for putting the phone down. Anyway, that was the Slab Boys. And it never happened with Cato Bell. And Tom was persuaded by Cordelia Oliver, the art critic on the Glasgow, was it Scots? No.
Herald, is it?
The Herald, I think it was. To have a Joan Early show, and then before I had my show, and so that was that. So it would never happen. And I wanted John Betchman to come to the opening, and all sorts of things. Anyway, cut a long story short, where was I?
The opening of the Third Eye and
Aye. That's where the half of the Billy Connolly, big 8 by 8 feet by 8 feet, was lost.
The missing banjo.
Yes, indeed.
Was it the People's Palace that lost it?
I've no idea. They
It's
picked it up
vanished.
from the Third Eye Centre,
And it was gone.
and they didn't even know. And he used to do postcards of Billy, who was in the right hand. Right hand.
Pointing at it, is he not?
Yeah.
He's pointing
And
at the banjo.
his shadows falls over the banjo.
Yeah.
And it's disappeared for 42 years. And I only discovered it a couple of years ago, and I went, rather careless, is it not? And I got them to send me the half back with his portrait on it, and it was in here for ages. No ages, it was in here for about a week. And I painted the other, restored the other panel to it, and they sent it back. So that was a nice...
I'm interested as well that, as well as both of you having this alias that you worked under, or still work under, both of you talking about slightly like writing a play in secret or private.
Yes.
Like there's a degree to which you don't sort of want people to know what you do. And both of you draw, design, both of you write. Both of you, is part of that not wanting people to know, is it that Scottish thing of not wanting to be a bit too clever and show off?
No, it's not about showing off, it's all about showing off, but in secret. You don't
Showing off in secret.
Yeah.
Now there's a title for something.
Showing
Showing
off in secret.
Yeah.
No, there's the other Scottish trait, which is talking it out, talking a great show or a great
Talking a
paint
good
or
game.
whatever.
Aye.
All mouth, no trousers.
Yes,
Whatever
indeed.
the expression is.
So I never say anything to anybody now, not a word.
Until it's done.
Aye, until it's finished. Aye. So they live in the thing, mate. Just go to the pub and talk a good story about what you're doing.
One of the classic or most quoted lines out the Slab Boys is that Giotto was a Slab boy.
Yes, indeed.
In the times that, because both of you, well, all three of us were at the Glasgow School of Art in different eras, but during the time that you were studying there, how much did you find about the history of art? Or this, I know you weren't there for were there for 2 years.
Yeah, I get chucked out at the end of 2 years.
Oh, really?
For not doing enough work, yeah.
Good Lord. Good God.
But when you consider how prolific you are now, it's kind of a weird thing that...
Well, do you know, that's one of the things I took from the art school.
Yeah.
The fact that it was the last time I didn't do enough work. I've been working non-stop since.
There you go.
But how much was your knowledge of art history, was that something, art and design history, that came out of being at the art school, or did you look into all that yourself, or
Yeah,
or at all?
since primary school, I had a whole bunch of coffee table books on the Sistine Chapel, Leonardo's sketchbooks, and I used to copy the muscles with no skin on them and all the rest of it. And I had those kind of coffee table books you get with, like about drawing, like, and you've got all these different styles of drawing and illustration and all the rest of it. I used to copy album covers and things, as a child. And I remember one time spending a whole day copying a £1 note. I had one of those packs of 30 coloured fibre tip pens, and I showed it to an uncle, and he turned it round. He went, "You've only done one side," and I was raging. but no, I had books on the Renaissance. I had books on like the Romantics, you name it. I had loads of books, so I had a lot of books in graphic design and illustration and whatnot. So I kind of that was kind of reading material for me as I was growing up through my teens, So by the time I got to Glasgow School of Art, I actually often dogged the lectures anyway, which was foolish. But over in the Vic smoking Galwas, drinking coffee.
I had a history of art teacher in high school who terrified me. She died recently. She's a wonderful woman called Rosemary Schofield, and she terrified everybody. She was incredibly, but she had this fantastic curriculum for history of art, and it was all based around Gombrich's.
Oh yes, aye.
So years later, after I did the book about Leia in animation, I was still in touch with my art teacher, Mike Gill, and he said, "Oh, you should go and have lunch with Rosemary. She'd love to see her. She'd be really proud that somebody, had done a book and everything." So I gave her a copy of the book and I went and had lunch. She couldn't have been sweeter, couldn't have been nicer.
Yeah.
And at lunch I kind of went and I said, "Look, I have to confess, I was just terrified of you because, you seem to be the fount of all knowledge." And she went, "I was a chapter ahead of you." And she cheated the whole thing, like she'd been given this job of setting up this curriculum for art and design history.
Yeah.
And she was ahead of us by one chapter in the Gombrich, but she was like laying it down like it was, and I was so convinced that she did a really good job of making it look like she was born with this in her veins, but she was actually busking it as well. So it's a kind of object lesson in what it is that you allow yourself to be terrified of. That obviously part of the thing for her was a defence mechanism. I hope nobody finds out that I'm cheating here or whatever. But for us, I remember also on the list of books, it wasn't just the story of art, it was all the Thames and Hudson paperback books about the history of printmaking in the 20th century, or about the history of sculpture, or there was one called From Baroque to, I forget what it was, but also the history of modern art. I mean, I grew up with this idea that there was art and then there was modern art, and modern art was all the stuff that didn't look like anything, or that was abstract, or that was in reaction to the arrival of photography or whatever. When you guys got started as artists in your own right, what did you either of you reach a point where you thought, now this is me on the page, as opposed to now this is me copying something or being into it? Do you think of yourself as being original in what you do, or do you remember a point where you looked at a painting or a drawing and thought, that's me on the page or the canvas?
I'm not sure. That's a very hard question. I now feel as if I'm doing stuff which is entirely my own, and I coined a phrase: I am the labourer to my unconscious, and I like my unconscious. It's recently, I mean, it's about 5 or 6 years ago, I realised I was labouring to my unconscious. Never pre-drew things to paint. I just sat down and Chuck Close observed that he says inspiration is for amateurs. They can walk about and stroll about and up under their arms, whatever. You just sit there and you do it.
It's about the work itself.
Aye, and I don't know where it comes from. except my unconscious.
But it is also fed by all the work that you've ever done observationally. That you have to, the early work, a lot of the things that you see in the biography, the work that you did when you got the travel grant, and there were butchers' shop windows and things that that you have that ability, both of you, to visualize things because you're both very astute observers of.
Yeah, and you've got a whole back catalogue of images and stuff.
When you saw the exhibition at the Kelvin Grove in the summer, what was did it seem odd or surprising to you at all that all this kind of iconic comic book art had come out of Glasgow? Or
It did. Aye, I was amazed. I was astonished, but I was astonished at the work, and when I saw all the work, I could believe it. But when somebody, Catherine and I, said to me, "He's got a studio above the, is it
the 13th note?
The which?
The 13th note. It's South Block."
Oh right, aye. She said a coffee shop or whatever it was.
Aye.
It's
a pub, but yeah, they do coffee as well. I believe.
I'm off down the coffee shop.
Aye. No, I was astonished at the amount of skill and imagination and real drawing. It's just wonderful. There was a shop in Paisley called Yankee Mags, and the guy used to go to America and come back with big bundles of comics, and you were in there, and the air was full of the smell of American comics, DC's, Nyok of the Jungle, Don Winslow of the Navy, Captain Marvel, all the comics of the day. It was a wonderful shop.
You mentioned that shop in an interview in
I know it's still with
Sogo magazine. It's quite recently.
Oh really?
Yeah, you were saying you kids would come to the door late at night and you would swap comics.
Swap. Aye, that was a great thing. A big bundle of comics. The door would go. You would sit in the doorstep, and you go, got it. Oh, swap with. I'll give you 2 faucets for that. The faucets were in black and white and British. Hopalong Cassidy and stuff like that, and the American ones, you just smell them, this different smell. It was like drugs. I can't think of anything else.
It's funny because that's very much still the thing, is that you have these it's like the people that collect music on vinyl, and they all hang around it, like the shops that sell albums, vinyl singles, all that kind of stuff. But the comic book culture of hanging out in like the places that you congregate to kind of share your obsession or your love of the medium, that's one of the things that worries me a wee bit about. I mean, I love the internet, but that actual physical social thing of going to a cinema to watch a movie, going to a shop to buy a comic, going to a gallery and
read a book in your hand, and go to a library and get a book out. Yeah, or buy a book and read it. iBooks. Enough said. Sorry.
But you're not that. But I mean, because the percentage of time that you spend working, well, actually most of your work now is on a tablet rather than on a. What's the percentage pencil to paper to working on the digitally?
It still all ends up as a pencil drawing on paper, all of it. What I used to do is when I was working out the sequence, I used to do the underdrawing in a non-repro blue, and then do the final line work on top. But what I now do is I still start with the script and I do the thumbnail drawings, like on the margins of the script.
Oh.
But then when I'm laying out the page, instead of drawing with a light blue pencil, I do that part on a Cintiq.
Yeah.
And I print it out,
so that's
A3
your template
on Bristol board, just using cyan, and then I do all the finished line work. So the 2 advantages of that are, like sometimes I would draw something, I would get the figure right, I would get the gesture, the body language, the facial expression, everything would be right, and then I'd think compositionally, that should just be 10% bigger. It would, it would fill the space better, or those two figures should be just slightly further apart. And drawing on screen, it's very easy to make those kind of changes. And the other thing is using the non-repro blue pencils. If I had drawn somebody and I didn't get the face right first time and I rub it out, each time you try again, the blue line work's getting weaker and weaker underneath. Whereas if it's printed out, it stays. So it takes a lot more punishment should you happen to have to keep redrawing the same thing.
A good tip for our viewers.
Remember that. Put that in your notebook. I'm sad. On Friday, I've got to go to the funeral of Baxter Cooper, who used to do the cartoon each week for my dad's newspaper. And I remember the first time I ever saw Bristol Board, he used to bring the stuff up to the office in Hanover Street, and he also used the Letraset that had the half-tone dots on it. It was like the Roy Lichtenstein, but it was like you could buy it in the same way that you could put the letters down on Letraset, but he had these sheets of halftone, and I just thought that was magical because exactly. When you were doing a daily or a weekly newspaper, you were at the mercy of what the printing process was. So the whole idea that now when people think printing, it's like, I hit print and it comes out of a machine in the corner of the room. But the idea that you had the offset litho or the screen printing or the engraving, again, that thing about actual tangible materials. Yeah. But I remember looking at it and thinking, that's how that happened. I
used to use that stuff when I was doing Electric Soup because it was printed in black and white. Yeah. And
so I'm not imagining it. I haven't just invented this.
Yeah, and I used to go to the art store. Well, it was McGavigan's back then in Exchange Square, and you could either buy a sheet where you cut it out
with a scalpel,
with a Swan Morton scalpel, or you could get the stuff that you rubbed down. It was like a transfer, and you could rub it down. But of course, bits of it would stick in other parts of the page. You didn't want it was a messy business.
Have you got now that you produce so much, because you regularly do like a 14-hour day if you're exhibition? Have you reached the point where you've got a kind of favourite set of materials, kit, paint, whatever? Do you always go, because I've seen all the bits of footage of you in at the Greyfriars art shop, just a whole pile there. Does it have
I know that is a pile, and they just open to that, and in the house I'll show you a palette. I'll get a bit of palette. It was on a thing it's just a mess.
But does it have to be a mess, or it's just like it's that?
No, it just becomes a mess. I don't want to make a mess. I start off with I occasionally clean my brushes. On occasions when I'm doing that, and I just and there's a couple of there's a palette up there. That was just hanging up from the thing, and I was trying to get the exact blue that was in the Billy Connolly thing. The mess is all around me, and the finished thing is, I'm looking at it, and it isn't messy. Out of chaos comes order.
So
I have to have that chaos, which is the leftovers of the production of the finished article. I'm very precise when I'm painting.
Do you have an equivalent to being a labourer to your unconscious in it? Because it's a slightly different thing if you're working to order in terms of actually realising a story and positioning characters in an imaginary space or whatever. But do you find when you're working that, have you got any kind of like internal voice or guidance or whatever that drives what you do?
Well, irrespective of whether I'm working on somebody else's script or a story that I've made up myself, or I'm just working on an image for something, it's the same thing. I've got a story or a scene or a character or an environment or an action and reaction. I've got something in my mind, and I'm drawing that, and unless I need a specific piece of reference for a specific type of car or a specific location, it's all, I don't spend ages going through books or the internet looking for a person standing like this. I'll just draw, and I tend to draw thumbnail compositions first.
Yeah, the same with storyboarding. If you're doing a film thing, I storyboarded. I did a after I made wrote Tutti Frutti, it was in between that and Your Cheating Heart, and I was asked to do a arena, and it was like a self-portrait and I storyboarded all of that. It's the same idea, a thumbnail.
How much, as guys that grew up in the West Coast, influenced by American movies, by American comics, American TV, how much, when you're looking at images in a DC comic or you're watching actors on a screen in a cinema, how much does that change the way you see the people when you walk down the street? I mean, does that influences your love of comic books or your influence from theatre or movies? Does that make a drama out of everyday life, that when you're walking down the street you'll see a particular thing that other people would walk past? Or
I think if you're an artist and you're observant and you like drawing and you're a storyteller and you like you like watching people and listening to people, and I think it's second nature. If you draw compulsively all the time anyway, it's in the same way that sometimes you'll hear a phrase or a snippet of conversation, you think, I'm going to jot some of that down, some of the key points of that, or you'll just commit it to memory because it's typical of a certain type of conversation that people often have. And similarly, I mean, lots of, I work very long hours, and and then I get the bus home at night, and if I'm not reading a book, I'll be doodling in my sketchbook while the bus is bumping about, and I'll be drawing the backs of people's heads, or I'll be drawing people standing waiting at the bus stop, like really quick, just trying to get the gesture down, and I tend to draw to unwind after a day of drawing, So
you have a day of drawing and then you draw to unwind.
Yeah,
so that's like a musician, isn't it? I mean, it's like you play an entire day doing sessions in the studio, and then you go home and you do for. Do you shift gears like that as well? Or it's always just...
No, I ignore everybody. I'm glad I'm slightly deafer now, because I don't take in things. I just make them up. I mean, I got all the information. I'm repeating myself from growing up in Ferguson Park, and I think I'm about 14. I was on the bus. And the bus does a circuitous route to get into Ferguson Park. Go down Well Street and then through Craiglee and along our road, Dalsgate Road, and then the terminus was round the corner. And I had a revelation that I was the luckiest guy in the world, because that was my world, Ferguson Park. Everything, every piece of information I ever needed the rest of my days
was in that little part of the map.
Aye, yeah.
But you also, you when we were talking before, you were saying that you do have a very, very good ear for patois, for dialogue, for the patterns of speech, the way that people...
Yeah, well, I make it up and it has to be... But it's an artifice all the way through. Artifice to get to the truth of the... If I'm writing a play, and it's the only place I write, couldn't write a book.
When you were a kid, what was your experience of theatre?
The wireless.
So it was dramatisation through the radio?
Wireless, aye.
Right. What would you listen to?
I would listen to Paul Temple, listen to crime. There was every Saturday night, there was always a crime thing. We had detective thing we on the wireless. And... the Big Flannels, and it was like the Bruins.
The Big Flannels, did you ever hear them?
No, I didn't.
The Big Flannels. And the thing that penny dropped with me, because the people doing the sales were called them Big Tweeds, and the ones across the land and the tenement were called McCottons, and the Big Flannels. McCottons and Big Tweeds. Took me ages. It was like... and there were great stuff on the wireless.
When you were doing the adaptations of Chekhov, I'm curious about that, because having sat and watched the interviews with Janice Forsyth and people like that, what was your first awareness of somebody like Chekhov?
Well, I think I had heard of Chekhov, I would hear him Chekhov. But the first influence already was George Bernard Shaw. When I saw Man and Superman on black and white television with Alan Bedell in it, and I went immediately to Paisley Library, got out a copy of, and I went, oh my God, look, I didn't know how you set out a play on the page.
So what you'd actually seen on the screen on the telly here was the
Aye.
template for it. It was stage directions and dialogue. And
Yeah, it was like, it just come out of the egg. it was a revelation to me. And so I knew how to set out a play. Much later on, when I was doing my... And Slab Boys started off as a musical. Jerry Rafferty do the songs. And he did one song with no words to it called The March of the Slab Boys. And I never get any further with that.
Wow, the March of the Slab Boys.
And then in 2004, I think, or 2003, a guy phoned me up and he says, you don't know me, my name's Neil MacArthur. I'm a West End MD and musical director. He says, how would you like to write a musical that'll use Jerry Rafferty's back catalogue? I says, come and see me. So that was when we were in Nairn. And he came, he says, there was one proviso. He arrived with his attaché case and his overcoat and his specs, and we sat in the kitchen. He says, one proviso, there can't be anything like Mamma Mia. I says, there's no likelihood it'll be anything like Mamma Mia. So I sat down that night and set off. And I had a book by my bedside.
I've still got the copy of it. Sorry, I should have brought that through with me. I've got the script for Underwood Lane, and I've got the biography that's got it, because you were going through, and then the paragraph it actually mentioned Underwood Lane.
But I'd left it as a treat when I finished the writing, and I wrote it in a butler's pantry, which was that width and longer, and it could take a coffin. I sat down on a typewriter. And I gave it a working title when I got to the second last scene. And I said, well, what do I call it? Underwood Lane, right? That's where the Raffertys were born and brought up in their early days. And then I picked up my book, and page 8 of the introduction, I came across Underwood Lane. I said, well, that's the title. It's obviously meant to be. And I left every scene on a cliffhanger, and I never even thought about it. Unlike other plays that I've written, it never occurred to me to even think ahead. I just went to bed and slept, got up in the morning and picked it up. And that was the delight of it. I was telling myself a story. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so it happened all. It was a different way of writing, you know. Because normally you plan something out ahead.
Do you find that when you were talking, when there was that interview with yourself and Grant Morrison at the Kelvin Grove a few weeks ago, the whole idea of keeping people interested in the narrative and in the characters, the notion of the device of the cliffhanger, or
well, that was me. I mean, I was enthralled. I didn't know how it was going to come out.
So it was a surprise to you.
It was a surprise to me, and if it surprises me, it's bound to surprise somebody in an audience.
That's very close to what you were saying about being a labourer to your unconscious.
Yeah,
you've obviously got a visual or pictorial unconscious, but you've also got a narrative one.
Yes, indeed.
Giving you episodes and events,
and
you don't know what's coming.
And 4.5 months later, I got a phone call, and he says, "Oh, I've given it to Jerry." And I says, "What did he say?" He says, "Could it not be more like Mamma Mia?" And that was 14 years ago.
It's not like Mamma Mia at all. Trust me, but it's an amazing piece.
Well, I've got the divide on the West Coast. Underwood Lane is Catholic, and Dartwood Crescent. And that's why they get two guys don't know one another. Didn't go to the same school. Joey Diamond and Desi.
The paths never cross because they're
either
side.
and they're the same age. So that was my device by accident. Accidental device. That was good.
Do you remember what the first Disney films or animated films were that you would have seen in the cinema?
Willie the Whale was the first one.
Willie the Whale.
101 Dalmatians for me.
What was it?
101 Dalmatians.
How old were you when you saw it?
I think I was probably about 7, and it was in Millport, and it was in the town hall, and it was just seats on the badminton court, and it was projected up onto so it wasn't proper cinema. It was proper cinema to me, and I remember really loving it, and I loved the fact that it was drawings. I loved the quality of the drawings, but I also remember being really frightened as well.
It's not a nice story.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know.
Yeah. Horace and Jasper, actually, they seemed really, really cruel and creepy to me when I was a child, and then when I saw it when I was older, I realised they were much
comic villains.
Yeah, they are comic villains, very much so. But
the odd thing there was that the look that so many artists love about 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone, that was born of the fact that they had to develop a Xerox process to photocopy the artist's pencil line onto the cell.
Oh, right.
Because the hand tracing that they did on Sleeping Beauty, which was the one before that, was so detailed and so time consuming that it cost like $6 million to make.
Yeah.
They couldn't carry on producing features if they had that amount of labour involved in the process. But Disney hated the fact that you could see the construction lines on the heads. The artists, the animators loved it because they always felt that the cleanup process lost it of something.
Yeah.
And it was Ken Anderson, who was the art director, before Disney died. He was interviewed about the last conversation he had with Disney, where he felt that he was being kind of absolved of the sin of having introduced the Xerox process that Disney kind of took a few years to kind of get with the aesthetic of it. But the other thing that they didn't own up to was that a huge part of the style in 101 Dalmatians was Ronald Searle.
Oh, really?
Searle was an artist that they loved at the Disney Studios, and he had visited while they were doing the pre-production, and he'd gone, "That's one of my horses," like, because they were like designing the and it took 25 years to them to fess up to the fact that had been.
Yeah.
But again, there was a guy who, and Uli Meyer at the moment is doing animation based on the Molesworth books. But all the Centrinian stuff, all the cartoons, the darkness that's in Searle's humour.
Yeah.
If you see his war drawings.
I know. I've got a book in the house with a thing with Japanese prisoners of war and Centrinians.
Aside from the movies like 101 Dalmatians, when did you start paying attention to how artists actually got the line on the page or coloured things in, or what the print process was?
I don't know. I mean, I remember when I was very young seeing Turnbull's political cartoons on the Herald and being really impressed with that scratchy pen and ink. And it looked to me like this was a guy who was drawing incredibly fast. And he was doing all these caricatures of Margaret Thatcher and Dennis Healy and all the rest of it. And but from a very young age, like, although I probably wasn't giving it a huge amount of thought, there were some drawing styles and there were some artists who I was naturally drawn to because of the quality of their line. So, but you mentioned Sargent earlier on, and the way he pushes paint around. I don't know anybody that paints who doesn't like Sargent.
When you started off doing, when you were saying the first thing you did for the Electric Soup guys, when you were talking at the Kelvin Grove with Grant Morrison, you said something that I found a bit surprising, which was that you kind of didn't have a plan to get involved in comics, so you weren't even particularly influenced. So what was the transition point? What was the moment where you realised that was actually your bread and butter?
Well, as I say, when I left art school, I was doing lots of different types of just any kind of work that came my way. Yep.
Yeah. And
there was something about writing and drawing a story.
Yeah.
And really being the only person that was in charge. I didn't have a client waiting, like giving me specific instructions.
Yeah.
I didn't, it was a simple, what did I want to write a story about? How did I want to tell it? How did I want to present it? And very early on, I found that simply being a team of one and doing what you want and not relying on other people to help out in any way was that, and the fact that it was ticking a number of different creative boxes at the same time. And much as I loved like doing a commissioned portrait in oils, much as I loved designing a poster for a nightclub, there was something about working on a comic page that kind of clicked for me. And I very quickly realised that there was no budget restraints. You were only restrained by your imagination, your ability, and the amount of time you had.
You can draw something knowing that somebody doesn't have to go away and build the set or go on location to film it.
That's it. Yeah.
It comes out your head onto the page and that's it.
That's it. And there was something about that I really loved. I was saying in the car on the way over here that most of the other comic artists and writers I know grew up loving comic books and wanting to do comics, and most of their artistic influences come from comic books, you know. And for me, I grew up with a love of drawing, with a love of painting, with a love of story, with a love of composition, with a love of cartoons, you know, with a love of graphic design, and I've got influence from all over, and I get into comics by accident and found that I actually loved it, you know. And I had read comics when I was younger, but they were just one of a number of things that I really liked.
It wasn't your aspirational goal from the age of 5 that, I'm going to be the next Stan Lee or I'm going to be the next... No.
Yeah.
Did you have any... I mean, when you were... You know, because I guess when you wind up over the course of your creative life doing so many different kinds of work... it's less likely that you'll have one person that you've emulated or that you've followed or whatever.
Well, I used to, when I went to the, very occasionally to the dentist, Mr. Ralph in Glasgow Road, and he always had the Saturday Evening Post.
I thought I was going to say he wanted to be a dentist. That was a career swerve.
And every cover was done by Norman Rockwell. And they were just absolutely brilliant. And I was delighted to learn that Grace is called. It's an elderly woman.
And a young boy in a diner?
Yes, and all the truck drivers are saying they sold for $48 million, the original. Not bad. And I remember the black guy going off to the Second World War.
Yeah.
And all the whole tenements were out. Or he was coming home and leave. Something like that. They were either saying au revoir to him or he was welcoming him back. I think they were saying he was off to in 1942.
One of the things I loved about Norman Rockwell, and it's the same as Dudley Watkins that drew the Bruins, is that he'll draw or paint people sitting at a table, but there'll be nosy folk at the table next looking over their shoulder or pulling a face, or
there's a wonderful one.
Everybody else is doing something.
The first date, and there's a young guy and he talks, he's about 14 or something, and the girl and her thing,
they've got the milkshake or something.
Yeah, he was a splendid guy. The barber shop is just miraculous. That
was one of the things that I found a bit kind of humbling when I was talking to the different artists, interviewing them for the book on layout. So many of the animation designers and artists in America, they were reeling off all these names of illustrators that were like Howard Pyle and just everybody in America knows them. Here, you tend to know about Rockwell or Saul Steinberg, or there's various people that you kind of know, but they just celebrate so many different kinds of illustration, and also they never there was never a thing that developed in America, or it didn't seem to develop, the idea that all the contemporary or abstract stuff had to eclipse what came before it. It was all allowed to coexist. So you could be interested in all the Jackson Pollock or Rauschenberg stuff, it didn't mean you had to pour scorn on Rockwell, or that you had to turn a blind eye to what people were doing in the New Yorker. Because the magazines like the New Yorker or the Post, I mean, when Hefner died recently, although people were saying all kinds of very obvious things about him, one of the things that kept coming up in comments people made on the internet was he paid higher rates for illustration and cartoonists than anybody else, because he had an appreciation of what it was,
and writers as well.
Yeah,
writers and illustrators.
absolutely.
But there's always been that sense that the American culture there's a celebration of
Popular culture.
in popular culture, the idea of observational, or that there's all these different styles that are welcome. Everything is there's never a point where something has got to be squashed down to make this thing more I think that there's a little bit sort of in Europe and the UK that the new stuff has to sweep all the old stuff to one side. And guys like Rockwell, continue to be. I mean, in the Brad Bird adaptation of Iron Giant, the town is called Rockwell, Maine. As a kind of like tip of the hat to the fact that this is the mom's apple pie picture of America. But he wasn't. The way he was working, I think, is what people imagine he was doing with the imagery. That I don't think that was the way his mind was working. A lot of the assumptions people make about that he was kind of doing something to put an American stamp on things. I just think he was a very good observer. I think he was.
Yeah, there's a wonderful one of a wee black girl
With the
going to
pigtail,
school,
in the little dress, and
the police escort. All you see is the gun, and you don't see his top half.
Yeah,
He's getting bussed in to the school. It's beautiful.
What was it like doing the ceiling painting? Because you're doing these environmental things for these for the Radisson Red. You're doing these line drawings, but the King's Theatre.
Well, I was astonished to get the gig initially. I thought, how did it come? They put that theatre and painting together. Anyway, they got Kevin, who's the scene painter at the Lyceum, and he set up. I did the big sketch, which is in the house.
Which is in the house at the staircase. Yeah.
I was astonished to get it, and then they said they got in touch with me and said, could we bring the rest of the board to come and chat about you? And I says, no, it's finished. They can come and see it, but
I'm not making any changes.
No, I mean, they just came and went, oh. Kevin at the Lyceum, and he set up projectors,
To get the image onto the
roof. And it's no actually a dome, it's a kind of half dome, and then it's flat in the middle, and then it's... And so he got it, and then he did a pencil thing of it, and got 5 or 6, including my daughter Celie, to go up and rough it in, because it was absolutely rough. And I went up and got it pin sharp from here, standing in a box. The whole place was being refurbished, and there's all scaffolding now. So he went up to the upper circle and climbed down, and then he climbed into the setting and stood in a box. And then he got off the box, he went totally disorientated.
Now you know how Michelangelo felt.
I know, it was 100 feet up, and I've not got hit for heights at all, but I was concentrating, and I got it really sharp.
How long did it take to complete?
5 weeks, I think.
Good God.
And all, I went in last week. I just tidied it all up.
And have you ever done set design or anything for theatre? Have you?
I had to do a backdrop for the school that my kids went to, the primary school, St Columkills in Rutherglen. And they gave me the size of the backdrop, and I worked it out on paper, measured it all out, and I got my 2 sons, who were both in their late teens at the time, to help me paint it up. And once we were finished, it took us, I don't know, a week or something, and we rolled it up and we carried it through. This was in the dining hall, flat on the dining hall, and we rolled it up, carried it through, and it was twice the size of the stage. The teacher who had measured it had made a mistake, and it was like, instead of being like 3 meters by 4, it was like 6 meters by 7 or something. It was just gigantic. And do you know, if we just walked in and looked at the size of the stage before we started, I thought, wait a minute, that's twice the size it needs to be. So it was a bit of a disaster.
In all the stuff that you have done over the years, recently when you had the launch for the new Jupiter, are there particular stories that you've enjoyed visualising more than others, or are there standout narratives or characters for you?
Really, I've always approached every job that I've done as like, this is what I'm concentrating on just now, you know. And if that was a mural for a school or a restaurant, or if it was like a window dressing for the art store in Queen Street, you know, or any of the comic stories that I've worked on for the past 2.5 decades, it's the same thing. What I'm working on is what I'm concentrating on, and I put everything into it. And
you were saying when we were talking to Carl that you know artists that will sit there and work out, I'll not put so much work into that page. You just put as much work as you can into everything. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, you're not going to get these minutes back. You're not going to get these hours back. You're not going to get these days back. You might as well do your best with what you've got, you know, and you get better at what you do when you do it that way, you know. This going back to the thing about the kind of value of drawing, you know, the idea that I understand that, you know, there's an argument that says you don't teach people how to draw academically the way you used to, but at the same time, if you look at like music college, you don't get into music college if you can't play any instrument, you know, simply because you've got concepts you want to share through the medium of music, you know. And I feel that there's an argument for saying that we should teach some level of drawing as a basic skill for the visual arts, irrespective of whereabouts you want to go with it, simply so that you've got a language. I mean, you know, like,
I think it's true. I mean, what I find is that if I've got, there's no barrier to it, and people can come in as mature students in their late 20s, early 30s, terrified of the idea of having to draw, and then can actually find that they can do it. But they're coming into a context where, for the first time, they've actually been encouraged or been given some pointers about what to do. Because a lot of people have a kindergarten cut-off point where people go, that's playground stuff. Yeah. It's like a sand pit. You don't do that any longer. We're moving on to the serious stuff. But Gobelin in Paris have a very high entrance requirement in terms of drawing skills, and 100% of their students go out and get work. They have to hit 100% placement in industry. But we don't have to do that in Scotland because there isn't an industry to place them in. We've only got really one big animation company at the moment in Scotland, you know, that's a huge employer, and that's Axis. But, you know, the idea that you would, I mean, when you went into the Glasgow School of Art, the emphasis on observational skills and keeping a sketchbook and painting, but that wasn't optional back in the day.
No, it wasn't optional at all. I remember going to the Royal College, and out with the time I should have gone because I was working, and they called the entire staff of the painting school into the director's office, and they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to earn my living by painting, and they all went at the Royal College.
What was their idea of like how you would earn a living? What was going to?
They were earning a living from teaching.
Yeah.
And they all thought they were painters.
But you wanted to do it. That was like a trade or a craft or a.
Never taught. Yeah. I never wanted to teach. No, I just wanted to go on with the job. Yeah.
Because for me, going back to the thing about problem solving, a very big part of what you're doing animation, theatre, story, design, lighting, colour, it is problem solving. Because
Yeah,
the
of course
challenge
it is.
that you face is how do we, over the next hour or two, keep the audience's attention, make them believe that this world exists, that these characters matter, and it's actually up to you to move people, you know, to get people have a sense of involvement,
Because
identification.
you have to be moved yourself before you move people. And you have to be hooked on what you're doing. You don't think of an audience. You're an audience of one yourself, and you're the judge. That's why there are very few great playwrights or writers of books or whatever.
Do you think there are too many people possibly, you know, writing, like you talk about playing to the gallery, or trying to deliberately, once they find out that something's successful, will try and repeat that success for the sake
Possibly.
of it? Or,
Aye.
but both of you presumably enjoy when you get onto a new project. I mean, you can't make yourself force yourself to do a 14-hour day in your studio if you are getting no pleasure or enjoyment or
It's
interest
the
out of it.
principles for my enjoyment,
Yeah.
whether everybody sees it or not. No.
I mean, I always find that when I'm working on something and I'm enjoying the process and I feel that I'm really kind of in the zone with it, your perception of time is very different anyway.
I don't know.
So you can finish a day and be quite surprised that it was 9, 10, 11, 14 hours, you know,
Oh,
because
I
you think,
know.
wow, what happened?
I know.
In the same way that if you're enjoying a symphony or a movie or a good book, you're annoyed when it's finished
I know.
because you just want, it's like, oh, I want that to start again, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are the people that you've enjoyed most collaborating with? Whether it's performers or cinematographers or in the work that you've done, do you have any particular partnerships or working relationships that you think have added to the project?
Yeah, several. One with Robin Lefebvre, who is a director, and he is only a director. I love working with him and certain actors.
In your work as well, you obviously value the working relationship that you've got with Grant and with other
Grant Morrison and Mark Miller, I suppose. Both of them Scottish, both of them Glasgow. And I think there's a kind of connection there. No, obviously there's a social connection, but there's a connection there, you know, like creatively, which I feel more strongly with those two than I do with most of the other writers that I've worked with. But it's funny because after so many years of collaborating, you know, I've reached a stage where I'm ready to go back to working myself again. So,
well, on behalf of anybody and everybody that gets the chance to tune into this and the other two conversations, thank you both very, very much indeed
Fraser,
for your time.
thank you.
Thanks from
Thanks very much, John.
to Animation Centrifuge, and tune in next time, folks, as they used to say on the wireless back in the day. And thank you again very much.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you.